Welcome to the second episode of our Nintendo Switch retrospective series, where we ask to hear from all of you what your favourite and least favourite aspects of the Nintendo Switch were. We covered most of the answers you gave us in the last episode, but there were a couple of questions left that we felt deserved their own spotlight. Partly because they are quite big questions, but also because we could definitely justify making these answers into another monetizable video for the algorithm. And what a YouTube-friendly video we have for you all today. It is the top 30 Nintendo Switch games of all time, as voted for by you. Dated June of 2025, the day before the Switch 2 launches. If a Switch 1 game comes out after this and you think it deserves to be on this list, just knock the whole list down by one or something. I don't know, I don't have future sight. Anyway, let's not dilly-dally, we have 30 games to get through and some honourable mentions. Let's just go for it. Puyo Tetris was one of the surprise success stories of the Nintendo Switch's launch. The Puyo series has always been popular in Japan, but it was absent from the West for over a decade by the time the Nintendo Switch came out. Powered by the confidence of Tetris, Sega released the game to the West, complete with a free demo, and it did extremely well, both critically and sales-wise. It did well enough that it got a sequel in 2020, and that's the game on this list. Puyo Tetris 2 is essentially just a better version of the original game. More content, more characters, some great gameplay, and stupid dialogue.
You're a bad man!
Ha! Is that what you think? I just want to ask Sid for his hand.
What?
It makes sense that it made the list over the first one, as there's no reason to go back to that original if you bought the sequel. It's one of, if not the, best puzzle game on the Nintendo Switch, containing the best of two of the best competitive puzzle games ever made. A crossover that nobody expected, and one that, on paper, should not work. Take Ubisoft's equivalent of the Minions, mash them up with Mario and pals, and give them all guns? And then make it a tactics turn-based shooter in the style of games like XCOM? What? Yet, despite its utterly bizarre premise, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle was an incredibly good game that just oozes passion. It is clear that Ubisoft Milan treated the Mario IP extremely well, and put on their AAA game faces to produce a really solid and well-executed tactics game, with a ton of variety and unique ways to approach each mission based on your party composition and weapon loadouts. They did all this while staying faithful to the Mario series, incorporating elements that it is known for like platforming to great success. And it did it all without making the Rabbids incredibly annoying, something thought previously impossible. Kingdom Battle did get a sequel in Sparks of Hope, a very solid game that we did a review for that we'll link below, and I honestly think the only reason it didn't make the list is because it just wasn't played by nearly as many people, and lacked the original game's novelty of having the Rabbids and Mario fighting alongside each other. Both are great, and you should play them if you haven't. It is fair to say that the Mario Party series has been having a rough time of things ever since the Nintendo Wii, trying to shake up the formula ever since Hudson went under, and not finding success in doing so. Thankfully, the Nintendo Switch saw the series truly return to form, and Super Mario Party Jamberee, the latest game in that series, is the culmination of everything its developers have learned. The game gave us the classic gameplay formula that returned in Mario Party Superstars, with all new boards that can stand up alongside some of the series' best, all while bringing in many of the wacky gameplay mix-ups found in Super Mario Party, like the partner system, while having a plethora of side content and extra modes to add a bit of gameplay variety. The game also brought Spike back, and that alone automatically bumps it up the Mario Party tier list for me. If Mario Party Superstars was the series' return to form, then Super Mario Party Jamboree is the series' logical next step towards its future, and one that is looking bright with each Power Star secured. The Nintendo Warriors series has had a strong presence across the entire Switch generation, with 2 new Fire Emblem Warriors and 2 Zelda Warriors, if we count the upcoming Switch 2 exclusive Age of Imprisonment. And these games all began back with one of the Wii U's best titles, Hyrule Warriors. And like much of the Wii U's library, it was ported over to the Nintendo Switch with a definitive edition, coming complete with all of the DLC and the 3DS version exclusive story campaigns, playable for the first time for console owners. Unlike the Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity and its upcoming sequel, the original Hyrule Warriors was not based on any one particular Zelda title, instead being a celebration of the whole series from the original Legend of Zelda on the NES to Breath of the Wild, with the 2 new costumes added in. Even though it was the first in the series, for many it is still the best, thanks to its simpler gameplay and its Hyrule-sized breadth of content. Seriously, it took me nearly 400 hours to complete the game on Wii U, and that's the version with the least to do. It's a massive game and still beloved by many.
Say the line, Bart!
Astral Chain has sold above expectations. One of the few new Nintendo IP introduced in the Nintendo Switch generation, Astral Chain is another take on the character action genre that Platinum Games has mastered across its many, many games. And while its chain-based lack of aerial combat having gameplay isn't for everyone, for those who it did click with, they found themselves having a very good time. In a world with Bayonetta, Nier Automata and Capcom's Devil May Cry series, it chose to do something a little different, and you've got to respect that. While its genre and story may not have been the most original out there, for Nintendo and its fans, the setting, presentation and style made it stand out from the many other games that were on the Nintendo Switch at the time, helping it to build a solid fan base to the point where Nintendo were willing to take full ownership of the IP outright from Platinum Games. Does this mean it has a future, a potential sequel on the Nintendo Switch 2? We'll just have to wait and see. It may not have new in the title, but Super Mario Bros. Wonder is the new Mario platformer that fans have been clamouring for, and its creativity made the wait worth it. The introduction of the Wonder Flower allowed Nintendo to surprise fans at every opportunity, going from your standard 2D Mario affair to a wall-climbing puzzle game, a full-blown musical, and everything in between. It's a game full of memorable moments that took the Super Mario Bros. Series to new places. It wasn't just the Wonder Flower that made fans happy. Nintendo expanded the playable characters out and gave us the return of the princesses and individual Yoshis for the first time in a 2D Mario since Super Mario Bros. 2. In particular, Daisy finally upgraded from mobile runner exclusive to full-on hero, getting to experience all the same power-ups and platforming prowess as the brothers. It was a truly wondrous title, and raised the bar on what Nintendo could accomplish in a 2D Mario game. The Nintendo 3DS was the system for Monster Hunter, and undoubtedly brought the franchise into the mainstream. While the big blockbuster that is Monster Hunter World ended up skipping Nintendo platforms, Capcom more than made up for it with a temporarily exclusive title in Monster Hunter Rise, a game that felt more traditional than World did, while still adding many of that game's quality of life updates and new abilities of its own. The monsters could fight each other and the world was less segregated, making traversing it less of a hassle than it was in the past. Taking advantage of this change to its world, Monster Hunter Rise gave players rideable canine companions and a grapple hook to swing through the world like Spider-Man. And look, any game that has a grapple hook in it immediately rises up the tier list. Those are just the rules. Monster Hunter Rise added a ton of new features while bringing in many from both generations and world, and did so in a masterful way that made Rise a ton of fun to play, both for series veterans and newcomers. The latest game released to make it on the list, Xenolade Chronicles X, was always the black sheep of the Xeno series, even including the non-Nintendo titles, with its MMO-esque gameplay and pilotable giant robots. What really makes X stand out, however, is the absolute vastness of its world. This was originally a Wii U game, debuting before the likes of Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring, and yet its map somehow still manages to dwarf theirs, making it truly feel like you are stuck on a different planet. And just like the other definitive editions that have graced the Nintendo Switch over its lifetime, Xenoblade Chronicles X brings with it many quality of life features, in particular when it comes to even explaining itself and its many mechanics. An actual explanation for overdrive mode, improvements to the combat system, and text that Grandma can finally read are just some of the ways that X took the original Wii U classic and improved upon it. While the game may always remain as the odd one out in the Xeno franchise, its ambition and scope far outstrips its siblings and is worthy of respect. The Wii U's Super Mario Maker let fans experience the dream of making their own 2D Mario levels in whichever gameplay style they grew up with, as long as it wasn't Super Mario Bros. 2. As good as that original was, it did lack in some areas, like not having the ability to make sloped terrain. Nintendo heard the cry from fans for slightly angled ground, and decided to make an entire game for it in Super Mario Maker 2. There were some other new features as well, I suppose. Super Mario Maker 2 took everything from the original and expanded on it with new power-ups, enemies, mechanics, and options to create new and ingenious Super Mario platforming levels. Yes, people still use this to make musical autorunners or Kaizo courses, and those have their fans, but some players went out of their way to make entirely new Super Mario Bros. Games, and share them online with the world, and Super Mario Maker 2 gave them the power to do that. Really, the only thing lacking from it were the original amiibo costumes and easy touchscreen options, but maybe the Switch 2's mouse controls will be able to fix one of those issues. Luigi's Mansion 3 might very well be the best looking game on the Nintendo Switch. Taking on the feedback from Luigi's Mansion 2, Next Level Games managed to craft a sequel that took on all the positives of the original, but in a much larger and experimental package, complete with co-op and competitive multiplayer and unique gimmicks on every floor of this haunted hotel. The gameplay is superb, but it's the presentation that stole the show. Luigi's Mansion 3 is the best that the plumbers have ever looked in a video game. Luigi throughout this adventure is incredibly expressive, with a ton of fun animations that vary depending on the scenario and whether you are playing solo or multiplayer. The environments found on each floor are unique and detailed, from a filming lot to an ancient pyramid to a gym and a pool. The writing is also pretty great, with the best iteration of King Boo we've ever seen. If the second game revived Luigi's Mansion, this third entry elevated it to a mainstay amongst Mario spin-offs, and I have no doubt a fourth game for Nintendo Switch 2 is on the horizon. The first Nintendo Switch game ever announced is also one of its best. The Dragon Quest series has had a very strong legacy on Nintendo, more so than its more popular step-sibling Final Fantasy. Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age was developed as a celebration of the entire series, telling a more traditional tale in a big-budget AAA fashion that suited the HD era of gaming. The story it portrays is bold and its characters dynamic and enjoyable. Best of all, Dragon Quest XI served as a great jumping-on point for new fans. It provided the option for traditional turn-based combat and modern positioning-based combat, while modernising the world exploration and enemy encounter system to fit current gaming standards. It was an elevating experience for this classic series. Dragon Quest XI Echoes of an Elusive Age Definitive Edition, that's a mouthful, takes everything found on the previous PS4 and Nintendo 3DS release of the game and combines them as best it can to create the ultimate Dragon Quest XI experience, with more content and new story for fans to enjoy. Of all the indie games to launch this past generation, Celeste is one of the more impactful. Telling the engaging tale of a girl just trying to climb a mountain, discover herself and break through her own mental anguish, making friends and understanding her own abilities as she does this. And this great story is told through mesmerising visuals, beautiful music, and some of the most satisfying platforming in gaming. Celeste is a hard platformer, a game that asks the players to understand its mechanics on a deep level and master them to make it through a series of challenging rooms, where one misclick or poorly thought out jump equals death. From a development standpoint, this type of game could be seen as high risk, high reward, as it is so easy to make it too difficult and result in a frustrating experience. But make it just right, and you have an all-time classic on your hands, and Celeste is just that. Celeste didn't just double jump over the AAA industry to receive this level of praise, it has dashed past all third parties and landed itself the spot of best non-Nintendo title for the Nintendo Switch from all of you. With the Switch, it feels like Nintendo is doing what it can to bring all of its back catalogue to the system, and it's starting with many of the series' fan favourites. And for the Paper Mario series, the ThousandYear Door on Nintendo GameCube is the pinnacle of Mario's various RPG outings. It has been sorely missed as the series moved on from its RPG roots to more puzzles and action-based gameplay following this title's release. But it came back on the Nintendo Switch and is now better than ever. Not only does the game look visually incredible, really bringing the paper and cardboard aesthetic to life, but the music has been completely redone, with new tracks added to battles in each location to provide more variety. The script was completely relocalized, adding back in one of the game's most beloved plot points for one of its best characters, and the new super bosses added add another layer of challenge for those looking to master the game. It's a brilliant title, and to think, it's only the second best Paper Mario game on the Switch. Wait. Well, this might be controversial, but you all made your voices heard, and the Nintendo Switch's original Paper Mario title, the Origami King, stands proud as a critically successful entry in the modern Paper Mario lineup. While the gameplay still has its issues, mainly that after a while the puzzle patterns repeat and it becomes way too easy, practically everything else in the game is the series' best. Just like the ThousandYear Door, the presentation is incredible from both a visual and audio point of view. But with far more years of game design under their belt, the team at Intelligent System crafted a world that's far more enjoyable to navigate than any of the series' past entries. Yes, this title might still be lacking in the original characters department when compared to the ThousandYear Door, but the characters it does have more than make up for it. Olivia is fantastic and one of the best partner characters across the Mario RPGs, and despite having a generic design, Bobby became a fan favourite, which is all thanks to the writing. The script for Origami King is one to write home about, providing plenty of laughs but also getting quite touching and sentimental when it needs to. Paper Mario the Origami King is the Super Mario Party of its sub-series. It learnt from the failings of its experimental predecessors while pulling some of what worked from the classics that fans loved. If Paper Mario the ThousandYear Door could then be compared to Mario Party Superstars, a title that returns to form by literally remaking what worked before, then that means the next Paper Mario has the potential to be the series' best, a fusion of the two styles that will make everybody happy. And honestly, I cannot wait. The Pokemon series has definitely had some lows on the Nintendo Switch, and no game has been afflicted with as much hate for this as Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and some of it is justified. There is a lot to criticise here, but when you look past all of that, many players found a really exceptional entry into Pokemon. The terrestrialization gimmick provided more gameplay options than Z-moves or Gigantamax ever could, and there are many quality of life features added that greatly improve the flow of gameplay. From a purely game design perspective, there is very little to complain about here. And that doesn't even touch on the exceptional lineup of Pokemon we got this time around. This is something Pokemon across the entire Switch generation has gotten right. A wide variety of truly standout Pokemon designs, like Tinkaton, Meowscarada, Clodsire, and Gimmighoul, to name just a few. And really, that's what most fans look forward to with every new generation, making a new best pocket monster friend. The original Splatoon was the breakout new IP for the Wii U, and so a sequel on Nintendo Switch was one of the most obvious games fans expected to see in the system's early days, and the devs approached it in a pretty fun way. While the core gameplay remained the same, the devs wanted the game to feel like a justifiably different experience, and so made efforts to retain the feel of the multiplayer while cutting out and replacing many of the core ways that players competed in the game, through its weapons, sub-weapons, and specials. Several, if not all, the specials were replaced, and entirely new loadouts were created so that returning players would be forced to come up with different strategies, an attempt to even the playing field at launch and make Splatoon 2 stand out a bit more. It wasn't all just the standard multiplayer mode though. Splatoon 2 also introduced extra gameplay modes like its take on COD Zombies, Salmon Run. It had a weird schedule where players could only take part at certain times of day, but when players could experience the run, it was a lot of fun. And then there was the Octo Expansion DLC, for many the best part of Splatoon 2. Not only did it add in playable Octolings, but it provided a much needed single player challenge, one that tested the player's ability to master all aspects of the Splatoon combat system, ending in the series' hypest sequence of stealth, platforming and combat challenges. Splatoon 2 was a great follow-up to Nintendo's popular new IP, and is almost certainly the reason the series managed to survive beyond the Wii U itself. The original Xenolade Chronicles is one of the best RPGs ever made, but it came out extremely late in the Wii's life cycle, and almost didn't get released in America at all. The game was bold and expansive, especially for its time, but it was bogged down by some low quality models and ugly UI. So when Nintendo announced a definitive edition for the game that gave it the full HD treatment, complete with an entirely redone presentation and quality of life improvements across the board, fans knew they were in for something special. And Definitive Edition was coming out at a time when Xenoblade's popularity was on the rise. Many fans of Shulk came from his inclusion in Super Smash Bros., and they were excited to experience his game for the first time. And what they experienced was an incredibly rich and engaging story, with a wonderful cast of British heroes. And returning fans got even more than that with an entirely new campaign in Future Connected, that served as an epilogue to the story and focused on one of the franchise's most beloved characters. While the game may show its age in places, as the first game in the Xenoblade series, it has still held up remarkably well, and is a real benchmark for how Monolith Soft has improved over just a decade. Fire Emblem has come a long way from a series that was famously almost cancelled to one of Nintendo's flagship IP, and no game in the series has quite stirred up discussion, both good and bad, as its most successful, Fire Emblem Three Houses. Three Houses feels like the culmination of several ideas seen across the series before it, such as the multiple routes introduced in Fates, the full unit customization found in Shadow Dragon, and the two-part story structure and world building of Genealogy of the Holy War, and all vastly improved upon. Its 4-campaign story structure in particular invited a lot of replayability and a ton of debate. Depending on your choices, some characters might be your best friend in one run and your worst enemy in the other. You get to see the world and its struggles from a different perspective than another player did, and that leads to conversation. Conversation that has remained in the zeitgeist far longer than anyone expected. It's the illusion of choice. No matter what happens, it always results in arguing about three houses for some reason. Everyone loves Kirby, he's the friend you should know, but in over his 25 years on this earth, his adventures were starting to get a bit samey. Star Allies in particular didn't make a huge splash, as it felt too similar to the series' Wii and 3DS outings. Kirby needed an overhaul, and our friend-shaped hero got it with Kirby and the Forgotten Land, the first true 3D Kirby experience. This title took everything that made the Kirby game so enjoyable and translated it flawlessly into the third dimension, opening up new options for platforming and environmental design. But it wasn't just from a gameplay perspective that Kirby improved. HAL used its new scope to make Kirby feel like a AAA experience. In the music, presentation, action, everything felt like it was taken to the next level with Forgotten Land, and it left a lasting impression. We have DLC on the way for Switch 2, but we're yet to see how HAL takes this newfound formula into the future. Will this style pave the way for the franchise's future, or was it a one and done occasion? Well, I know all of you want it to be the former. On the topic of starting fresh, the Pikmin franchise returned on the Nintendo Switch with a new numbered sequel, one that took a surprising turn by essentially rebooting the entire series and telling an alternative version of Olimar's original adventure. Except there are dogs this time.
What the dog doing?
Pikmin 4 takes everything laid out by the first 3 games before it and enhances it to make it even better. It somehow managed to deliver a bigger game than any that came before it, while avoiding the frustrating pitfalls that Pikmin 2 suffered from. Its new Dandori feature in particular tested the player's ability to be efficient, and the nighttime battles provided a gameplay twist on the traditional Pikmin formula. With a ton of treasure, creatures, explorers, and abilities to discover, Pikmin 4 blew all expectations out of the water and ignited the spirit of Dandori in all of its fans. While I spoke on the difficulty that the Pokemon franchise was having over the Switch generation, there was one title from the biggest media IP in the world that was almost unanimously praised as being excellent, and that is Pokemon Legends Arceus, the first in a new mainline series of games that aims to buck the trends of traditional Pokemon. Legends Arceus took the player back into the past, to a time when the Pokeball was a novelty and the idea of living alongside these monsters was considered with slight hesitation. Instead of fighting to be the very best like no one ever was, the goal took from Pokemon's other big motto, gotta catch 'em all. The formula was flipped on its head. Now the player was the one hiding in the tall grass waiting to pounce on unsuspecting mons. But you better watch out because there are no rules in this era of Pokemon. These wild animals won't hold back when it comes to attacking a trainer. Legends Arceus took the series in a bold new direction and surprised many fans, and its success looks to have kept this new series going, as we'll be receiving a new game with the Legend moniker later this year, one that also looks to change what a Pokemon game can really be. It had to be up here somewhere, the best-selling game on the Nintendo Switch, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. For some, this is just one of the ports Nintendo brought over from the Wii U, with a few bells and whistles and a lot of DLC. But for the vast majority of you, who, let's be realistic here, completely skipped the Wii U, the Switch was your first time experiencing what might be the peak of the Mario Kart formula. Ever since Mario Kart DS, the team behind Mario Kart at NCL have been slowly adding to and tweaking what a Mario Kart game can be, adding in bikes, gliders, different forms of terrain, and then ignoring gravity altogether to create some of the most inventive and crazy looking tracks in any kart racer. And a deluxe version of this game, one that fixed many of the issues fans had with the original Wii U release, and then on top of that, doubling the game's content with an entire DLC booster course pass that added new tracks and drivers. It's just shy of being Mario Kart Ultimate at this point. It's no wonder the game was almost Mario Kart Infinite with how long it lasted, but now a new Mario Kart releases tomorrow, and it has a lot to live up to. Can it do it? I guess we'll be the judge. It was nearly 20 years coming, but we finally got our hands on the mythical Metroid Dread, the 5th mainline game in the Metroid series. Just please ignore all these other games, thank you. Continuing on the story of Metroid Fusion, Metroid Dread took Samus in a slightly different direction than many were expecting. While that did lead to some disappointment, it was easy to overlook it with just how cool Samus was this time around. The stoic, no-nonsense bounty hunter is using her new physical combat techniques alongside her traditional cannon blast to mow down any enemy in her path, and is looking good while doing so. But that's not always enough, and just as the game gives Samus and the player their power, it also doesn't hesitate to rip it away from us, with the Emmys, robot death machines that can effortlessly end Samus's career if she's not careful. Just as Metroid is an action series, it's also a horror franchise, inspired by the original Alien horror franchise itself, and these moments in Dread are classic reminders of this, impressively told through gameplay as well as story. Metroid Dread was a long-awaited return to the classic Metroid style, and hopefully we won't be waiting another 20 years for its next entry. While Splatoon 2 was a great game, in many areas it felt more like a half-step, a Splatoon 1.5. The basic multiplayer options were similar even with all new loadouts, and the campaign was incredibly similar, practically retreading the pacing and style of the first game. With Splatoon 3, however, it finally felt like the team had taken the series to a new level, bringing in everything that worked from the final post-DLC version of Splatoon 2 and adding even more on top of it. New modes like tricolour matches and table turf battle provided extra variety for players, as did the plethora of new weapons, specials, abilities and stage themes, all tweaked and balanced using 2 prior games worth of experience. There were far more customization options for the player in Splatoon 3 as well, with Octolings now available by default and lockers for players to personalise, adding more avenues for players to show how fresh they are. When you add on the DLC, which was practically an entire spin-off game on its own, Splatoon 3 provided a brilliant experience that is still going to this day. The Legend of Zelda series was massive for the Nintendo Switch generation, with several different kinds of Zelda games making an appearance on the platform, and the biggest was absolutely the 2 new games by the main Zelda team, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. and both have made it onto this top 30 list, with Tears of the Kingdom being the first that we'll talk about. After the groundbreaking success of Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom had a lot to live up to, and with the developers choosing to make a direct sequel that used the exact same vast world, the game had to do a lot of work in order to stand out. It couldn't just be the same game again. Thankfully, the developers understood this, as even though it looks very similar, the game throws out the core physics-focused gimmick of the original for an all-new power system, one that's designed around fusing objects together to solve problems. Build a bigger sword, make unique arrows, create a car, a boat, a giant robot. The world of Tears of the Kingdom is yours to mess around in, with so many little switches and items that are both obvious in their application and yet work together with all other items in a unique way. Tears of the Kingdom is a fantastic follow-up to Breath of the Wild that managed to reuse its assets in a smart way by overhauling the way players approached its world, absolutely deserving of its place in the top 10. While Shulk in Super Smash Bros. Undoubtedly brought attention to the series and put it on the radar of many Nintendo fans, it was 2017's Xenolade Chronicles 2 that propelled the series from its niche and into the limelight. It was Nintendo's first big traditional RPG for the Nintendo Switch, closing off the system's first year, and this position it took made it a must-have for early adopters of the platform. It was also a must-have for Xenoblade fans, as it was a return to form after Xenoblade Chronicles X on the Wii U, which took the franchise in an alternative direction. It was highly anticipated, and also a pleasant surprise. While Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is certainly not perfect, with many valid criticisms levied against it, like its awful field skill requirements that relied on an unneeded gacha mechanic for recruiting optional party members, the game was still an improvement over the two that came before, at least mechanically. And while many prefer the party of the original game, it cannot be denied that the heroes of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 have left a lasting impact. Pyra and Mythra are unarguably still the series' most popular characters, even earning them a place in Super Smash Bros. It was an all-around incredible time, kicking off the Nintendo Switch as a Xenoblade machine. But it's not the most popular Xenoblade game on the system. It is fitting that the culmination of the Xenoblade Chronicles series so far is also the series' most beloved entry. Narratively, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 brings together the worlds of both Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 and leads them towards the series' future. And mechanically, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 managed to take the best of both games and fine-tune it into the series' best gameplay. There's more customization, allowing for different approaches to your team party to go along with the much larger parties in general, increasing the standard 4 up to 7. The game also introduces a ton of new gameplay concepts on top of the returning ones to add further variety, and manages to do so without it feeling as overly complicated as X was. What really pushed Xenoblade Chronicles 3 to its peak was its character writing. Pyra, Mythra, and Shulk might be the series' most beloved party members, but Xenoblade 3 is the only game in the series where every member of your core party is beloved by the fandom and feels fully fleshed out. When you add in the hero characters to the mix, a 7th party member that can be chosen from over 20 unlockable options, there is bound to be a character that resonates with the player. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is an overall fantastic addition to the franchise and a great way of closing the book on this introduction to what may ultimately be Nintendo's premium traditional RPG franchise. It's time for the top 3, and you know that Mr. Video Game himself had to be here. The Nintendo Switch had a lot of return to form titles, and Super Mario Odyssey started that trend. After the 3D Mario titles had slowly been adopting a game design and structure from its more successful 2D outings, the original sandbox style of game established in Super Mario 64 had taken a long break, and Odyssey dragged it out into the limelight again, pushing it to an absolute extreme. The worlds were bigger, the power-ups and puzzles more experimental, Mario's movement tech had been fine-tuned to great satisfaction, and the amount of collectibles to discover was frankly ludicrous. But it rarely felt as egregious as Super Mario Sunshine did with some of its most annoying secrets. It's the biggest Mario platforming game to date, and made a huge splash in the gaming scene, right from its first reveal. so no wonder it became the highest rated Mario game on this list. Yet it is not the highest rated game from the Switch's first year. As our last video showed, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was many players' first game on Nintendo Switch, and also many players' favourite. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild not only brought massive sweeping changes to the Legend of Zelda series, but it was undoubtedly one of the most inspirational games of the last generation, with several other video games being openly inspired by the changes it brought to the open world formula. While Tears of the Kingdom is certainly the bigger and more refined game, where it lacked was that first time wow factor. Tears of the Kingdom could never replicate that same feeling of Link stepping out of his starting cave and being thrust into the world of Hyrule, let free to explore and allowing the player to forge their own path. And that impact is more valuable than any kind of new mechanic or well-written story. It sits with the player for years on end, and it will take a long time for another game to quite hit in the same way Breath of the Wild did for its fans. Okay, before we get to number 1, let's go through a few honourable mentions for the games that were close to making the top 30 but just missed out. The previously mentioned Mario Party Superstars and Pokemon Sword and Shield were both fairly well liked, but lost out to their most recent releases. We also saw the return of 2 franchises that hadn't had games for over a decade, in F-Zero 99 and Clubhouse Games 51. As for the third parties, Square Enix put up a pretty great showing with both Octopath Traveler 1 and 2 fighting each other for popularity, alongside the very well done remake of the cult classic Live A Life. Bayonetta 2 still sustains its title as the series' best entry, while both Hollow Knight and Night in the Woods represent those smaller developers who can still make games that fight alongside the AAA for popularity. And with those quick name drops out of the way, let's reveal our finale, the best Nintendo Switch game as voted for by all of you. We expected no less from the Source Gaming fanbase, to be honest. Of course, the latest Super Smash Bros. Game would be your favourite title released for Nintendo Switch. We have to admit to there being some bias around this pick, but don't let that cloud any judgment of Ultimate deserving the number 1 spot. It truly does live up to its title as the ultimate title in the Super Smash Bros. Series. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate set out to do one thing, and that was to bring back every fighter from the whole franchise, and it did so while also managing to bring back nearly every single stage and song, and then on top of that added a plethora of new characters, stages and music through its base game and multiple DLC passes. What fans were left with was the ultimate video game exclusive crossover with an insanely large roster of iconic characters from Nintendo, Sega, Bandai Namco, Konami, Capcom, Square Enix, and even newcomers to the series like Microsoft, SNK, and Disney. Ultimate is truly a one-of-a-kind game, to the point that fans are even unsure if there'll be another Super Smash Bros. Game, if there should even be a new one. Ultimately, Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo Switch was a community experience that left an impact beyond just the game itself, much like with Breath of the Wild. Waiting for those character reveal trailers was an event in and of itself, and the amount of community-driven discussion and speculation was high. It helped that, when the game came out, it was pretty universally received as the best game in the series, up there with the previously undisputed king Super Smash Bros. Melee. Ultimate refined a lot of the new elements brought in through Brawl and Smash 4, and took steps to make the series appeal to both a casual fanbase and a competitive one, the first in the series to really do so. Even before its years of support, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate was already living up to the hype, and that is still going strong to this day. It is the best the series has to offer, and for many, it's the best experience the Nintendo Switch itself had to offer as well. We can only see if the inevitable Nintendo Switch 2 entry can even top it. And that does it for the top 30 Nintendo Switch games as voted for by you. We have one video left in this series where we will be taking a look at all of the potential Switch 2 games that you all want to see released, both from Nintendo and its partners, but that will be out after the Nintendo Switch 2 releases, which should be tomorrow. This video is closing the book on our Nintendo Switch 1 coverage, and we'll be shortly opening the next volume in Nintendo's library, but you'll need to give us some time to play it first before we can talk about it. I'm sure you're all eager to as well though. On screen right now are our patrons from the $5 plus tier. We appreciate all of our patrons who support us and keep the website up and running. We have some exciting plans this year for the channel and website, and if you want to support us, our Patreon link is on screen. But even a simple like and subscribe goes a long way. It shows us what content you're interested in seeing and ensures that you always remember to return to the source.